Welcome to Fire Service Court Radio with John Murphy as your host today. My cohorts, Chip Comstock, Brad Pinsky, and Kurt Barone are not available for this recording. And so I'm doing solo today. So we're going to be doing, the title, as you can see on the slide in front of you, is called People Fires Never Go Out. I just want to remind everyone who listens to our radio show, Fire Service Court in session, we always talk about legal issues and how they're affecting the fire department, how they result in sometimes large awards against your organization. Sometimes they result in terminations or demotions, or people just leave. And so we've been harping essentially on the law components of what the fire service legal issues are. And so I thought I'd take a break a little bit and talk about professionalism and fraternization, which is a part of a presentation I made in Arizona a few weeks ago. And I thought that, we've never really talked much about it. And I know that we present ourselves as professional firefighters and professional fire officers. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, what it actually looks like. And then the other part that we never talk about until it comes up in a court of law is fraternization, where, two people in an organization are getting together. One may be a supervisor, the other one maybe a junior firefighter or a probationary firefighter. And we see those issues developing into a huge problem for the organization as it deals with morale, probably morals of the organization, and certainly can result in litigation, which we'll talk about sort of later as we get to that point. So what I want to do is pretty much talk, first of all, about this is good advice, but not legal advice. And I always tell my audience, and I know that when we do the larger show, we tell our audience that this is good advice, but not legal advice, right? So if you have a legal issue affecting you or your organization or a member of your organization, our expectation is that you will go talk to your HR person if you have one, or your district's attorney or your city's attorney, depending on what sort of organization that you're in. So get some real legal advice. This is good advice. This will point you in the right direction. But for real advice, get a hold of your own legal counsel. So every department must have and should have a vision, mission, value statement. And the purpose is basically what's the organization's core purpose, setting some direction, strategic planning, and then ethical and moral principles that guide your daily operations and decision making. And some organizations have, 2 or 3 lines. This is our vision, missions, values. Others have a couple of pages worth of what their vision, mission, values are for the organization. And I think regardless of whether it's 6 lines or 90 lines, as long as the message gets put out there that, you're part of a larger group in your community, you're basically, we want you to be the team player in your organization, and you need to reflect that sort of value out into your community, because every day your community is watching you. They watch you drive down the streets. They take video, use their cell phone cameras to take videos of you, post it on their favorite social media site. And we want to make sure that we are emulating whatever the mission value statement is for your organization. And I've always suggested that you post those like everywhere, like in the waiting room, in the bathroom, in your gym, on your apparatus bay, in your training room, have a plaque put in your office. So you sort of remind yourself every day of why I'm here and what my purpose in this organization is, and how can I make this organization better and serve the needs of our community. So in that, you should have some mention of accountability. Certainly customer service is a big deal. And not only is it customer service out in the community, but it's customer service towards you, because you're the fire department's best customer. You're the employee or you're the employer. And so customer service is highly rated, not only internally, but externally. We want to make sure that we're adhering to our diversity policies and our diversities within our organization. So as I've said like 100 times before, most times you take a look at fire department organizations and they're a bunch of white guys like me, right? And so we want to make sure that your fire department reflects your community. So whatever the value of whatever the percentage of population is, maybe Black, maybe Hispanic, maybe women, maybe Asian, and maybe whatever. We want to make sure that when your community looks through the doors, they see them, right? So I think that's important that we do have a diverse workplace, and we can do it. I mean, it's not that difficult. You also want to have employee involvement, and I know that some departments have weekly or monthly meetings with their membership. Just talking about how much of an involvement can you participate in, what level of involvement. You're at the chief's level, or in the intermediate management, or are you the brand new person in the organization? And every person should have an equal voice in where the organization going, and the issues that affect our organization. You want to make sure that we're fair, which has its whole meaning, but fairness in policy development, fairness in policy application, fairness in promotional opportunities. Those sorts of things is we want to level the playing field so everybody in your organization who's qualified has an equal opportunity to do whatever the department needs, or whatever their goals are. And I think at some time when we ask individuals, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? Or what do you want to do in the next 10 years? And some people, don't want to do anything. They just want to show up for work, be a best firefighter ever. And others, like myself, wanted to be the fire chief. And until we got to be close to the fire chief and having to do fire chief work, and you're going, oh my God, this is like not what I expected. As a young lieutenant or as a battalion chief, the chief's job is entirely different than what I would envision when I first came into the fire department. We want to make sure that we are operating with integrity, and again, that's essentially with being open, honest, fair. Excuse me. In your dealings with the community and each other, and also open communications is as important. Excuse me. We're going to talk a lot about professionalism next, but we're going to be moving on to the teamwork component. The mindset, I think that every day we need to go in with a mindset that we're going to do the best job possible. And then the wellness component is not only physical wellness, your physical health, fitness, eating, exercise, cardiovascular capacity, the things that we take for granted sometimes that we need to work extra hard on sometimes. But the other part is the mental wellness. So we're in a stressful occupation. We see things that other people don't see. And I think that organizations need to have, a level of peer counselors. Sometimes HR can provide a pathway into an outside professional as in the form of a mental health professional or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, because we need to make sure that we take care of our brains and our mental wellness as well. And as you know, suicides for firefighters is higher than line of duty deaths. And we've just had a few recently in my neck of the woods out here in Washington State. And so the question is are they preventable? And the other part is, did we recognize that these people were struggling? So I think awareness is very important. And then it's also important for us to make sure that we're, in good mental status when we go to work and when we come home. And we make sure that our fellow firefighters are equally as stable with, ask the question, be a friend, point them in the right direction if they appear to be in trouble. And so let's take care of our own firefighters in the area of wellness. So we also talk about, our internal policing or policy management. And usually everything starts at the chief or the HR high level. Supervisors and managers and employees are sort of on the bottom of this sort of triangle here. And so what I like to do is I like to invert the pyramid and say, look, as an employee, we have certain expectations, like to treat others with respect, report misconduct, get involved, cooperate in investigations, and conduct yourself in a professional, legal, ethical manner, and then hold others to that standard. That under your vision mission statement, you do have standards, right? And you do have codes of conduct, and you do have ethical codes. And so we want to make sure that at the lowest level in the organization, we're complying or adhering to those standards, and it avoids a lot of problems if it doesn't, sort of boil over or create conflict for other members of the organization. And that's our, I think, as an employee at the lowest level, that's our responsibility. The next level is the supervisors and managers. And again, if there's trouble brewing on the apparatus floor, we need to get involved. We cannot turn our backs on it. We cannot say, oh, that's just John. He's always like that. We're going to ignore it, because you're going to get a complaint, and that complaint is going to manifest itself as a lawsuit, and you're going to lose because you didn't do anything about it. And so look at your policy, follow your policy, get involved, keep your ears open for what's happening in your organization. Because again, I think that's important to take the pulse of the organization every time you go out. If you're the battalion chief and you roam around in your district, or you're a station officer, pay attention to what your people are doing, what they're saying, how they're interacting with each other. And again, and that saves a lot of problems down the road. So be cognizant of what happens in the organization. And then in human resources, again, they ensure the compliance, provide the training, maintain the records, help create the policies, can direct you in a pathway if you need some further assistance. But HR should be the last group notified if there's a problem in the organization, because we need to take care of it as employees and as supervisors. And if we can't do that, we need to pop that up the chain of command to HR and the fire chief for sure. Because as a fire chief, I've said this before, I don't want to all of a sudden have a knock on my door and I get it served with a complaint that my department is getting sued by one of my firefighters for discrimination or harassment, retaliation, those sorts of things. I want to know what's going on now when it happens, and not years or months later. So let's put this all together, and we'll nip a lot of those issues in the bud. Our workforce is changing. We're getting a lot of different people knocking on our doors. Language differences, cultural differences, religious beliefs differences. We're seeing some religious groups pray 5 times a day or more, and that incorporates time when they're on the job. So again, we need to make some accommodations for that. And as you see on this slide in front of you, there's a lot of change coming down the pike in your organization. And so we're taking a look about, on the right hand side, there's more me time and less organizational sacrifice time, I guess. I know when I came in to the fire department, it was all about the department. And if they needed overtime or they need somebody to step up to the plate to do extra jobs, my generation would do that. I mean, and I'm seeing now the younger generation does it, but they're more invested in themselves and their families and time off and that sort of stuff. And they're less likely to work extra overtime or mandatory overtime and those sorts of things. We're seeing a lot of people coming in expressing themselves in different manners with hair and beards and jewelry and tattoos, clothing, and some religious sects require that they wear a headgear. And so again, your organization needs to be accommodating under federal standards, first of all. And second of all, be accepting of different cultures coming into your organization, because they're coming in. So just be aware of that. And then my big question, which I always ask, is Mrs. Smith suing the police or fire departments? And the answer is we sue ourselves, right? First of all, the civilians who sue us for failed rescues, long response times, adequate or inadequate resources, burning down their businesses or their homes. Some people sue for records transparency for police agencies, which may be sitting right next door to you. And then family members suing after deaths involving firefighters. And we've seen a big lawsuit in Ohio lately where there's a large award because one of their family member who is a firefighter died in a fire that was, in trial, apparently mishandled. So we need to, try to avoid those litigations by doing the right thing. And then, like I said, we sue ourselves, right? So firefighters sue under federal and state civil rights law, sex discrimination, race, a national origin discrimination, or sexual harassment, hostile work environment. And generally, these are filed in a federal court. And most of the time, the department settles because your insurance carrier, who basically will take your case, will say, well, do we want to fight this in court and spend X amount of dollars, or we just want to settle this and spend Y amount of dollars, which is generally a lot less than taking this to court and losing, right? And so, typical claimants are your female firefighters and fire officers, your officers and firefighters of color, the LGBTQ community plus officers, and then occasionally males, right? Uh, Officers will sue, or male firefighters will sue because they've been discriminated against. And I know that in our past classes, we brought up a lot of litigation involving male members of the organization who have been discriminated against, harassed, and retaliated against for lots of different reasons, but not quite so much as women firefighters and people of color. So you take a look at the percentiles, and obviously there's more litigation that goes on with those groups than there are with white firefighters and male firefighters, but it happens pretty much across the board. Retaliation, again, is the most common and expensive, when we talked about that before. Reporting misconduct, filing an internal complaint, testifying against other officers and firefighters, cooperating with investigators or prosecutors, or reporting harassment or discrimination. And again, retaliation is deliberate. So if you're being discriminated against and you get put off on the stations as out in the wilderness and you never get a call for 5 years, because you reported misconduct, that's a retaliatory action, and those are deliberate. So the discrimination component of it, well, maybe you can argue that away in court, but if you're retaliated against, that's black and white, and generally those win, and they are worth a ton of money. So be very careful and never retaliate against somebody in your organization for any particular reason. We sue for wrongful termination or discipline. And again, it's a due process violation. Didn't get your day in court, failure to file any sort of collective bargaining agreements or memorandums of understanding in your organization. Sometimes it's arbitrary or politically motivated discipline because they want you out. And a lot of these things go through arbitration first. And if arbitration fails, then it usually goes to court unless there's a settlement way prior to going to court. Whistleblower lawsuits, and again, we see this not so much on our side, except for embezzlement of funds or mismanagement of money from the taxpayer or the federal government. But a lot of times we'll see, firefighters using excessive force. If there's like an arson case and the firefighter may be involved in the arson, evidence tampering, falsifying your reports. Not for so much for us, but more for the cops. When you have a quota system, and we always blame the speeding tickets. Like, you have to get so many speeding tickets this month. So, falsifying your numbers. Or let's take a look at from the fire side is how many fire inspections do we do, right? So if you're assigned 30 fire inspections per month or 20 or 10 or whatever, and you don't do anything, you don't go anywhere, you just pencil whip the report, and then there's a fire in that particular building that you were supposed to inspect, and then they find out you never showed up for the inspections, you can be charged, right? You can be criminally charged, first of all, for not correcting a fire hazard, which is maybe easily correctable, but for falsifying a government report. And those are termination events for sure. And then we've seen, frequently, and maybe all too frequently, is misuse of funds, and mostly in organizations that have a single treasurer. They run the fire department out of a checkbook in their front pocket. They're in control of the money, and all of a sudden you see this sort of declination of your savings account in the organization because all of a sudden you see false companies, ghost employees, and other methods to erode money out of your organization. Failure to promote and favoritism is a big lawsuit, and we've seen the Frank Rieke and his lawsuit in New Haven, Connecticut, many years ago, talking about reverse discrimination and a promotional process, and that's a whole discussion. Which if you want to look at it, it's called Rice, RICCIV versus DeStefano, in this New Haven, Connecticut Fire Department lawsuit, where there's a promotional process, and city government basically said, well, we don't have enough minorities in there, we're just going to get rid of the whole test. And so several of the firefighters who were in line to get promoted said, no, this is a discrimination. This is reverse discrimination against us. We did what we were supposed to do. We're high on the food chain as far as grades and all the other requirements go, and it's unfair to us. So they sued, went all the way to the Supreme Court, and that case basically was found in favor of Frank, and his cohorts, and against the city of New Haven. So make sure that you're not doing that in your organization. So when you do promotional testing, it's above board, and it's fair and equitable, and it doesn't have any inherent biases in it. And again, these cases all often overlap with discrimination or retaliation claims. So we have to be very careful that we don't enter into that death spiral on promotional issues. Disability and medical claims, we see a lot of PTSD, which is difficult to prove. I know in my state we have presumptive illnesses, like most of you, and PTSD is part of that. And it's a challenge to prove it that you have PTSD. And my wife, as I said, is a psychologist and works with firefighters and police officers and military. A lot of PTSD being treated, but to get it as a valid claim, our state, our worker comp system is pretty much focused more on visible injuries like fractures or lacerations or those sorts of things. And PTSD is that sort of, I can't see it, I can't touch it, it doesn't exist. So you have a hard bar or a high bar to jump over in order to get your claim approved for PTSD, but it's worth it and you should work on it. So the other part is on-duty injuries, fitness for duty misuse. And so sometimes we'll have fire chiefs saying, well, I don't want Murphy to be in my organization. He can't do the job. I'm going to send him out for a fit for duty or a IME, like an independent medical exam, to see if he can actually do the job. And sometimes you got to be careful because I may have a disability that I wasn't aware of. It just affected my performance. And so now I have a disability and you have to accommodate it. And so you don't get rid of me. I'm there more than ever. So you got to be careful about why you do these sort of fitness for duties evaluations. So you may bite off more than you can chew. Forced retirements. And again, common legal theories of disability discrimination, failure to accommodate, and then improper medical separation based on some sort of fabricated medical finding on what you're actually looking for may not be what you find. So be aware. So anyway, and oh my gosh, I have again apologize for the parsing here. When these guys pop up, sometimes letters move around. But anyway, we're going to talk about professionalism for firefighters. And so where do most of our first impressions come from for firefighters? And it's, from media, movies, television, print media, social media, personal exposure and experience. And, we can't do much about the movies or we can do a lot about television and print media. We can do a ton on social media when you have your own Facebook or X account or whatever accounts you're putting your department activities on. But I think the best way to get first impression is our personal experience in the community when your firefighters are interacting with your citizens and the experience that they have. I know that burning somebody's house down is a horrible experience, but I think that, the firefighters and the chaplains, the other support services can make that kind of take the edge off that horrific experience if they're treated nicely and we're sympathetic with with their problems, and we do everything we can in our power to help mitigate those sort of circumstances. So personal exposure. Professionalism defined is the consistent demonstration of integrity, competence, respect, and accountability. It's a set of standards, and then typically defined as a mix of professional ethics, codes of conduct, uniform, and grooming standards. So we look good, right? We're in a uniform. We drive fancy red trucks and vehicles down the road, lights and siren a blaring. We're looking good, but where they're really looking good is behind the uniform and what's inside of the uniform. And that's where the professionalism actually starts. You as a professional, we want to engender a public trust in your department that people will actually call you because some people are afraid to. I think that there's some parts of society, especially from other countries, that anybody in a uniform and a badge are not to be trusted. So we need to overcome that sort of fear of the uniform or fear of the uniform professional. And a lot of that has to do with experience, because rumors and the word of mouth spread quickly through like an immigrant community. Social media is very important that your PIOs are putting out good information about your organization and the things that you're doing for your community. And then professionalism bridges the gap between power and accountability. And any person that we see in a uniform, there's the illusion, I guess, or the actuality of power, right? Police power, fire department power, anybody with a badge, federal government power, the FBI, immigration, those sorts of things. Powerful images, because we do carry a gun as a cop. We do have a badge as a firefighter. And so we want to make sure that our professionalism does bridge that gap rightfully. And so we use our power appropriately. What does it look like? Again, our key components of professionalism is we got to know what we're doing, right? Knowledge, mastery of skills, a good set of policies and procedures, codes of conduct that we follow. We have to have good skills when we're out in the public, putting out fire, doing rescue, extricating people, doing high angle, low angle rescues. I think that the other day when they had that balloon into a cell tower, those firefighters are up 900 feet to 1,000 feet off the ground affecting a rescue. That's a skill, right? That's a skill. And that was all over national news, international news. People are flying drones all around the place. So we're watching as an amazing skill set. And these guys saved those 2 or 3 people that were in that balloon and did an admirable job, right? Admirable job. Character, ethics, and honesty, again, is very important. And that's how we, portray ourselves to our community, that we operate in an ethical manner. We're honest and we're impartial. So we treat everybody equitably, regardless of color, gender, and those sorts of things. We look good, right? So we want to make sure that our uniforms are clean. There's a lot of hairstyles and standards out there. Most organizations will have some sort of a grooming standard, but and that's the organizational's obligation and right to make sure that they put together a good grooming policy. And it talks about beards, and there's been a lot of litigation on beards, and mostly it has to do with a medical condition, unfortunately experienced by black male firefighters, called folliculitis barbae, where when you shave, you have ingrown hairs, very painful. So a lot of departments are allowing what they're calling shadow beards. And so, and that controversy has been going back for the last 10 years. You can have them, you can't have them. You can have them, you can't have them. It's like, let's set a standard. Let's make sure we accommodate the disability and make sure that we're following our own standards. Tattoos certainly have their whole range of experiences. That it is a First Amendment right of expression, but sometimes tattoos are very offensive, and the organization has, again, the ability to regulate what is seen by the public. So you can put, if you have sleeve tattoos, the department may make you wear long sleeves. If you have a neck tattoo, the department may require you to wear a turtleneck. So the department, again, can establish the grooming standards, not interfering with your First Amendment right, especially around tattoos. And then the public often judges the whole profession by one firefighter's behavior. And that's so true, right? So like they said, I saw this firefighter who's doing this and this and this to the, that individual. And so we're all judged by one person's action. So when we're working with individuals, make sure we're treating them respectfully, right? And so sometimes you have to defend yourself. I'm not saying just, set yourself up to get injured or beat up on the job, but, just defend yourself, trying to de-escalate tense situations. We're going to talk about that later. But again, everybody's watching you and everybody's taking videos of you. So you want to be on your best behavior, do the best job you can for every client or patient that you see, or every emergency response that we go to. And again, the traits we take a look at is integrity and honesty, accountability, reliability, those sorts of things. I think that many times we try to pick those traits up early, through the interview process, through the testing process, through probationary periods. We just take a look at how people are operating on an individual level through that whole first year of probation, through the recruit academy. But again, it starts at the interview where you do the group interview with members of the organization. You do individual interviews. The chief does his interviews. So we're looking for the honesty and integrity which people have to have when they come into the organization, because we can teach the skill set, right? So we don't care if you got the skills. We want because we're all about customer service. We're all about internal customer service. We're all about treating people, fairly, equitably, and those sorts of things. And you bring that stuff with you, right? So it's our job to pick that out and make sure that you have it. We can teach you how to drive a fire truck or raise a hose. We can do all that sort of stuff. So we don't have to worry about whether you have the skill set to do the skills. We just worry about whether you have sort of the internal integrity and honesty and those factors that we can't teach you. So you got to bring those with you. The ethical foundations, and again, the oath of office and the code of ethics provide the foundation for those. And so as firefighters, you always have to ask, is it legal, ethical? Is it the right thing to do? And the thing I always say is that, what would your mother say if she saw you acting in this way? And certainly I know how my mother would say if I was acting in an unethical manner out on the field. So just be aware of that. And so code of ethics for the fire department, you got to have one. Many fire departments' codes of ethics establish professional standards. And again, it's maintenance of public trust, ensuring integrity and guide to conduct both on and off duty. So even if you're off duty and you're associated with the organization, there can be ramifications for bad behavior that goes on out in your community, committing a crime or domestic violence or robbery or selling drugs and those sorts of things. So you're always connected to your fire department, whether you're on or off duty. And I try to remind people that is so true. We have to be communicators, right? So we take a look at effective communication as the hallmark of professionalism. How we, talk to people, how we stand in front of people, and again, the language and word choice matter. So words matter. We have to listen, right? So most of the time, we listen to answer, right? So if I'm having a conversation with somebody, it may be a little bit tense. You're going to be listening to answer what I'm talking about. So are you really listening? And that's one of a skill we can develop. And it's a skill we're not very good at because we always want to be talking and we always want to be responding. And I think, being a good communicator has probably 90% of it as being a good listener. And then if you're in a tense situation, which we get into more and more often, because I think the impression of uniformed services in our country anyway is getting a little skewed. And so people are a lot more confrontational than they used to be, a lot more aggressive and hostile. And so we need to be working on our de-escalation skills. And there's classes for that. And I recommend your organization have somebody come in and teach you those skills. But it's all about communication. So communicating and listening to people, what they have to say. We're here to solve problems and we need to be problem solvers. But in order to do that, we have to be able to listen. Social media, again, we've had so many discussions about social media and how it's so destructive. And so it's not only destructive to your organization, because you're creating an image on a social media platform, but for you personally. And so you can take a look at Kurt Verone's website and see how many firefighters have gone down the road because they violated their own personal or their professional obligations to stay off social media or stop putting, racist material on there or, other material that offends like everybody. And so we need to use our social media judiciously. And I know that it's hard to do because there's so much stuff out there now that we're getting. Sometimes we get gaslit. Sometimes we get drawn into these conversations that really originate from bots and not real people. And so we got to be careful about how we interact on our social media platforms. And we want to do it for good, right? So, and there's too many of them out there. They all say that Facebook now is for old people. To communicate, to see their pictures of their grandchildren. But I know that my social media site has a lot of different people on there, mostly people I'm associated with professionally, with family and schoolmates. So it's a one method of communication, but you got to be careful about what you put out there. Professionalism and community trust. Again, trust is the currency of public safety, right? So professional builds legitimacy and cooperation with the community. And so, like for an example, if you hold fire alarm drills in schools, and the trust is, we're expecting that the fire drill is orderly, professionally managed, that we have assembly points. But if it's in chaos and disarray, or we created that situation because people don't trust with what we say or where to go or where to assemble, then we're going to, see an increase in fatalities in these large scale events. So I think it's very important that, we engender the public trust, and then, and trust is the currency of public safety. So, and then again, make sure we respectfully conduct ourselves with our citizens. It does reduce complaints and lawsuits, and increases compliance. And every contact leaves an impression. And I like to say we want to leave a positive one, even though the time that we interact with people may not be so positive because of a death or an injury or a fire or whatever the emergency is. And so we want to make sure that we leave with a positive image, that we've done everything possible for that citizen in your community. Professionalism and firefighter safety. And again, we talk about de-escalation of violent scenarios, and we're seeing a lot more pushback on uniformed officers, and that's us. We're uniformed. And again, calm, respected demeanor reduces aggression, and then professionalism promotes mutual respect and safer operations. So it's important that we react with people on the same level that they react. For the most part, but if they start getting aggressive, then we need to be less aggressive, because aggressiveness only, engenders more aggressiveness, and we want to de-escalate those scenarios. And as I talked about before, that's an important class that your organization needs to take. And again, recognizing your stress triggers, and we talk about what are your hot buttons. So we do have them, and so what gets you ramped up from 0 to 100, in a second. Figure out what they are. Don't let people push those buttons. There's a breathing technique called tactical breathing. You can look it up on Google. It's pretty easy. It's in for so many, it's hold for so many seconds, and then it's exhale for so many seconds, and then it's cyclic, right? So you can do that, in maybe 2 or 3 session rounds. And so just calm down, right? So we don't want to be overly aggressive. But we need to make sure that we don't get harmed on the job with overly aggressive people. You want to rely on your training and teamwork. Fortunately, we work with teams. We have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people that are with us. So we need to make sure that we read each other, and training does that a lot. So even though you may not say anything, your cohort partner or somebody on your team can recognize when you're in a jam with a patient or somebody in the community, and kind of step in and sort of break up the sort of the tenseness that goes on there. And that's again another tactic and technique that we can train. And so we should be able to do that, right? Maintaining that relationship with each other, and then seek support when needed, right? So, and I said earlier, professionalism includes mental wellness, and then firefighter suicides are a significant crisis, and everyone is a tragic loss. And everyone, we always ask the same questions. What did we miss? What did we miss? So I think that, there's no satisfying answer for that, but it's self-care, self-regulation. And for those of you who are in the organization, just look around and see what's going on with your teammate or your cohort or your partner, and make sure that they're safe as well as you are. And then we want to be continually developing our professionalism, right? So training like this, education, some mentorship. So bring somebody in that may be a junior member of your organization, teach them the ropes, teach them the good habits, not the bad habits. You want to learn from the mistakes of others and listen to feedback from others, because we may not always like it, but it may all have meaning, that they're seeing something that we're not seeing. So and that may make us change our behavior. So we want to read our journals. There's a lot of periodicals and magazines and books out there. You want to review case law because there's a lot of that. And again, I recommend taking a look at Kurt Barone's site. He has a pretty robust site as it deals with updated litigation that goes on in the country. And then talk to your peers, like, go to conferences. And so I think that, in April, there's the largest conference in the country. And I think, if you have an opportunity to go, go. And if you're going to go, if you're there, then welcome and have a great time. But start talking to people. I did a class a few months ago. It was unexpectedly large. And so I had people from Dubai, I had people from Singapore, I had people from the UAE, all people from other parts of the world. And so, and then there was a bunch of people from departments in America. And so, how often do we have an opportunity to interchange with people from other countries, especially, and it was a EMS conference, is how often do we have an opportunity to interact with somebody from another country talking about their EMS systems? And so I had them make a 10-minute presentation about their country's EMS system. And it was like so interesting. But, would we have stopped in the hallway and say, hey, tell me about, your EMS system. How does it work? How's it organized? How many calls you have? And so, you get unexpected opportunities to listen. And then we want you to strive for excellence and not perfection, right? So be a best firefighter you can be, and make sure that people that you work with are, excellent, but they don't have to be perfect. We don't want you to be perfect. We want you to be excellent. I am so sorry. We're getting a lot of allergens, pollens out here because, like in Washington State, it's nearly springtime. We just had our last snowstorm last night, I think, and it's going to start raining for a week. So, anyway, I divert. So, in summary, we look good on the surface in our uniforms and our red trucks, lights in the siren are blaring, but professionalism is beneath the uniform, and that's what you bring to the table. What you bring to work can affect your professionalism. We want to make sure you make a conscious choice to represent your department professionally by your actions with the public and each other. And the last one is, if you see something, say something. So we can stop a lot of behavior in the organization. We can stop a lot of maybe bad interactions with your community because we may, our hot button maybe have been pushed. And so we want to make sure that we intervene, we help calm down the situation, and we create a professional environment that people will admire. And again, because we are generally tax supported, that they vote for our initiatives, right? Property tax, levies and bonds, and those sorts of things. So the last one is sort of, which I don't think I've ever had a class on fraternization. I know what it is, and I know what it looks like, but I don't think we really have ever talked about it. And so this is pretty much, can it be interpreted as harassment? And so, what is fraternization? I think every organization must have a policy on how we interact with each other on a relationship wise within our department, because they define it as a relationship that falls outside of normal work interactions and communications, which is usually but not necessarily romantic or sexual in nature. So the departments who create and adopt these sort of fraternization issues, sometimes it's done because you had an incident and you didn't have a policy. And so my advice and my other legal cohort advice would say, let's have a policy first, and then we have some, clarity and not ambiguity as to what a fraternization relationship is all about. And does it sort of affect a policy that we don't even have in a place? And could it be harassment? And sometimes it is. And could we get sued for it? And sometimes we do. So everything sort of points back to litigation and preventing litigation in the organization. But what we're trying to do is create an environment where people are not intimidated by those in a superior position especially for a relationship, or if there's sort of a quid pro quo relationship between a supervisor and a subordinate, which is illegal. We sort of identify what they are and enable through a policy some prevention and prevent retaliation. So what is fraternization? So it's an inappropriate personal relationship that compromise or appears to compromise professional integrity, supervision, discipline, or impartiality of an organization. Pretty simple, huh? And so, and again, it doesn't mean you can't have a relationship. It's just that when the relationship creates controversy or creates difficulty for other members of the organization, then it becomes problematic. So, but this is what it is. It's an inappropriate personal relationship as it's been defined. It's romantic or sexual relationships between supervisors and subordinates, close friendships that affect objectivity, and then off-duty socialization that influence on-duty decisions. So for an example, going to a party, and alcohol pretty much in our culture is part of the party. And so we make some dumb decisions when we're under the influence of, which come back to haunt us later on. So we got to make sure that off-duty socialization doesn't get out of control and come back to affect you in the workplace. Why is it a problem? Undermines the chain of command or authority, leads to low morale and loss of team cohesion. And then it damages public trust and departmental reputation, because people in the community hear about it. And so if you think the community is ignorant of what goes on in your organization, it is not. Because, the department is a great rumor mill. And sometimes those rumors get out into the community. And so it damages that sort of department trust and the reputation. The department's policy overview, again, typical policy elements are a ban on romantic relationships in the chain of command. So that's the superior subordinate relationships, ban on romantic relationship between existing firefighters and probationary firefighters, because it's a power position and it's generally about power. And so there's an imbalance of power between the probationary new firefighter and the older established firefighter or the officer, creates that sort of conflict. And then there's going to be disciplinary actions for violations if you have a policy. So if you don't have a policy, what's the standard, right? How are you going to discipline somebody who may be engaged in a romantic relationship on and off the job? I just want to clarify this is that, yes, we do have relationships. Yes, people in the fire service marry each other. And so I think done correctly, it's okay, right? But if you're doing it for, nefarious reasons that, and so people become harmed or the organization becomes harmed, then that's where your policy comes in order to help protect people and prevent these sort of behaviors from occurring. Supervisors, you got to have the ear to the ground to be aware of relationships. You want to make sure that you yourself model professional conduct, avoid relationships that compromise leadership, address rumors or early warning signs, and enforce policies consistently and fairly across the board. And again, if you as a supervisor are engaged in some sort of behavior with individuals in your organization that may be of a junior status, then that could create a problem for you and for the organization. So stay away from those. And again, and I reiterate, we see supervisors having relationships, getting married. We see, non-officers, firefighters having relationships and getting married or having, the girlfriend, boyfriend, or partnership, which are all okay. Just when it creates some issues in an organization that it becomes problematic. And so again, discipline can occur, especially if one side is harmed and not the other. There's a perception of impropriety. And so in the fire service, appearance matters as much as reality. And again, could the relationship cause others to question my judgment? Would I be comfortable explaining it to the chief or the public? And then could this impact morale or credibility in the community? And again, it's the community that sees everything because they're watching us. So we got to be cognizant of that, especially on the impropriety component of relationships. Off-duty conduct in social media, and again, off-duty relationship can still affect professionalism. Stay off your social media site that you're having a relationship with somebody in the organization, because it makes people's eyebrows go up. We're a bunch of gossipers, and we like to talk about other people, and the community likes to talk about other people, and especially if it doesn't involve them. And so we want to make sure that we're not the subject of gossip in the community. And so stay off your social media sites if you're having a relationship with somebody in the organization. And then again, you want to maintain boundaries at department events, parties, and online, only because we have a tendency, we're social animals. And so we want to be liked by others, and we want to like others. So we need to maintain that sort of professional boundary that doesn't cross the line and cause harm or cause other people that they need to do things that they ordinarily wouldn't do because you're in a position of power as a supervisor, or you're a senior member of the organization and they're not. So be aware of those sort of power imbalances. The legal and ethical implications, again, Title VII could be sexual harassment or hostile environment claims. We do have equal protection and due process. So if you do file a claim, you have the right of representation. You have a right to due process. So you want to take advantage of all those sorts of things. And then we have an ethical duty to avoid any sort of appearance of corruption or favoritism towards one member of the organization over the other. Maintaining your professional boundaries. Let's keep our relationships professional. Let's report relationships per policy, and that's mostly self-reporting. And so, we don't want to start this. Oh, hey, Murphy's having a relationship with Susan, or Susan's having a relationship with Bob. Let the self-reporting mechanism take place. But if it's creating a problem for either Susie or me or Bob or somebody, or the organization's having a problem because there's favoritism, there's choice assignments, there's, I get to go to school and you don't, those sort of things cause problems in the organization. So if that occurs, then, maybe not to have the relationship is maybe a wise choice, or recuse or reassign somebody to a different station that they're not always together in when they're on the job. So I know that one fire chief that I worked with many, many, many years ago, two firefighters got married. He wasn't in favor of that. So he put them on different shifts, right? And it's a 3-shift system. And they only get to see each other, for a very short period of time on their, equal days off, which weren't all that frequent. And so they didn't file a lawsuit. Basically, one of them left and went to another organization, kind of resolved that problem. But it could have been litigated as discrimination or disparate treatment, because they were a legally married couple in the organization, and the chief just had a bias against it. So you got to be careful about those sort of reactions to people having a relationship in your organization. And then again, you want to maintain respect, discretion, and confidentiality in these sort of relationships, because, like I said earlier, you have a right to relationship to have the relationship. It just is not right when you're the superior, they're the subordinate, or there's a power imbalance going on between the two. So you got to be aware of that as well. Strategies for prevention. And again, this annual ethics and professionalism training, clear and enforced fraternization policies, open communications, and then encourage reporting without retaliation. And this could be the self-reporting component, where you may walk into the fire chief's office and say, hey, chief, I'm having a relationship with, and so I just want to let you know. It's not like I'm going to stop, but I just wanted to let you know that, we have a relationship, and, we'll keep it professional, and, all of those sorts of things that you want following policy, and just good behavior on the job and off the job as well. Leader or supervisor and culture, again, leadership sets the tone for professionalism and the things that we're talking about. And then again, what you allow, you approve. So you want to foster a culture where fairness, integrity are the norm. And it's normal to have a relationship with somebody that may not be in a position where you're in a position of power and they're not. So be aware of that dynamic as well. So can fraternization become harassment? Again, the supervisor-subordinate relationships are tricky. Essentially, they create exposure for sexual harassment claims, hostile work environment, and retaliation allegations. And a lot of departments just ban these outright. So the key issue is the power imbalance of the supervisor-subordinate relationships. Those you need to avoid. Relationships affecting investigations. And again, you may be dating somebody who's under investigation for personnel issues and you're the investigator. I'd recuse myself because you're not going to get a fair outcome. Socializing with somebody you're investigation or investigating, and then the loss of objectivity because you may be having a relationship with that person, and so your whole entire objectivity and outcome of an investigation goes by the wayside, and it could be basically tossed out if there's a finding either for or against that particular person. So the key issue here is compromised integrity and credibility. Favoritism and morale, and again, even if no rule is broken, sometimes you get the subordinate superior relationship. The subordinate may get choice assignments, easier schedules. There's discipline coming up. They just sort of look the other way. And then inside information sharing about, especially promotional opportunities or training opportunities that may be held sort of close to the vest and only a few people go that know about it. And then all of a sudden, you step up to the plate and say, hey, I heard that we're doing this. I want to go. So the question is, where did you hear that? And so you got to be honest in your answers. So sometimes the person that you're having a relationship said that there's an opportunity to train, which may not be open to other people. And so you have sort of the insider knowledge. So the key issue here is they destroy morale and often leads to grievances or lawsuits. On-duty conduct, sexual activity on duty is no, just flat no. Using department resources, vehicles, facilities, time, and it sends an inappropriate message on, inappropriate messaging on department devices. Because remember, there's no expectation of privacy when you're using department equipment, computers, phones, pagers, any of that sort of stuff. So don't expect any privacy on those devices. And then the key issue here is the misuse of public resources and trust. And especially if you're discovered having sex in the back of your fire vehicle, that just destroys community trust and the perception of what goes on in the organization. And it's a morale buster, and it could be a career ender. So be very careful. Not that I'm saying you should do it, just don't do it. And so be mindful of where you are. Fraternization cases have led to terminations or demotions, civil lawsuits, costly settlements, and then dissolutions. So if you have a relationship or you're married to somebody and you're having an extramarital affair and your spouse finds out about it, more than likely you're going to get divorced. And in my early early lawyer's career, I can't tell you how many firefighters I facilitated their divorces because of the shenanigans that went on at work. A couple of cases here. This is Starling versus the Board of County Commissioners. The court dismissed a lawsuit by a demoted firefighter who had an extramarital affair with a subordinate, ruling that fire departments can regulate relationships between supervisors and subordinates to ensure effectiveness. So what this court did was they reinforced the fact that, yes, the fire department can have a policy, and yes, the fire department can enforce that policy. And there's, you could try to overturn the policy, but generally the courts don't interfere with the ministerial duties of the department. So that means the courts usually let the departments run the departments unless it's illegal. And most of the policies, which are our laws, are not illegal because we run them by our attorneys to make sure they're legally viable. So in this case, again, the court reinforced the ability of the organization to create a policy and enforce the policy. These are a couple other cases. This is a Oregon case. Summary judgment basically is a motion to dismiss the case because there's not enough facts in there to continue the case. So the summary judgment was upheld against a firefighter claiming sex discrimination for being fired over an affair doesn't violate his Title VII rights. The Teng v. Phillips, again, the same. The court held that terminating an employee for consensual sexual contact with a superior is not illegal, right? So they could terminate you because you violated their policy, which is clear and unambiguous. And then Beecham versus Henderson County, the court ruled that the county had a valid reason to terminate an employee due to her romantic relationship causing disruption in the workplace. So again, clear violation of a policy. And so, as I said earlier, the courts are not going to interfere with the department's ability to administer membership and create policies which are valid and legal and enforce those particular policies. So there's 4 cases that are pretty illustrative of if your department has a policy, let's not violate it. Fraternization isn't always misconduct, but it becomes a problem when it undermines supervision, creates conflicts of interest, compromises investigations, damages morale or public trust, and then exposes the agency to a liability. The takeaways here are terminations are generally upheld by the courts when a relationship in the organization violate policy. Policy enforcement departments are encouraged to have clear and unambiguous fraternization policies. And then many departments are awarded, many fire departments award results in large payments rather than go to trial. And then settlement is usually the go-to operation. As I said earlier in the presentation, that your insurance carriers will kind of weigh the benefits of going to trial and the cost of that. And then as opposed to settlement probably by far is cheaper. And you still may lose in court. So not only did you have the court costs, you'll have a jury that will administer a discipline to you for, violating of one of your firefighters' civil rights. And the awards are generally very large. So there's a lot of punitive damages in there to sort of dissuade future conduct by the organization. So best practices for departments, and again, clear written policy, not vague. So conduct unbecoming, in parentheses there, is that sort of term of art that says we can't make a policy for every possible thing the fire department does or the firefighters do. And so we have a conduct unbecoming clause in our ethics and a conduct unbecoming policy that they can sort of garbage can all of these sort of, oh my God, we don't have a policy for this sort of stuff. And so conduct unbecoming is sort of objective and not subjective, but there are clear cut things that you may do that are not unambiguous. They're not subjective. They're very objective. And so the department can make a reasonable disciplinary action based on those conduct unbecoming allegations and evaluations. Mandatory disclosure of relationships where conflicts exist. And again, that's superior subordinate. Sometimes automatic reassignments when supervisors are involved. The department should have regular ethics and harassment training. And again, I reiterate, the supervisors need to keep an ear to the ground and be aware and pay attention to what goes on with members of your organization, because you can stop a lot of bad behavior early by having a conversation with those who choose to have a relationship within the organization. In summary, again, fraternization erodes trust and discipline. The appearance of impropriety is damaging. Boundaries protect officers and departments. And then last one is prevention is everybody's responsibility. And I really just want to thank you for spending the time today. And I apologize for the parsing on that. I'm going to have to do a better job next time. But I just want to and make sure that we're safe, and that we're safe not only out on the streets, but we're safe in our stations, and create that sort of hazard-free environment for all of our employees. And with that, be safe. We'll see everybody at FDIC next month. And until our next presentation, and hopefully I get all of my attorneys here, be careful and